Do you get that dull, itchy, and restless feeling in your leg? Don't move. Don't scratch. Don't tap. Don't bite. If you can hold still for just a few minutes, I want you to watch what happens inside your own body, not the outside, inside. The itch isn't on your skin after all. It is in you, humming in the cartilage, settling behind the eyes, nesting in the soft sacs of the lungs, where thoughts condense like breath on frosted glass. Stay with me. You're already thinking about scrolling. You can feel your hand twitch. If you don't move, I promise you'll catch it in the act. The thing that lives between the beat of your heart and the click of your teeth. People talk about self-control like it's a clean glass kept high on a shelf, reachable, dustless, waiting to be chosen. They forget the fingerprints. They forget the thirst. They forget how the hand moves by itself. Everyone has their ritual, a small, private technology for surviving sensation. For some it's tapping, for some it's chewing, for some it's the thumb sweeping over the same worn scar until the scar remembers the thumb. My dad's ritual arrived early, the way some storms come in childhood and never really leave, just hover past the horizon, recharging. It didn't announce itself as a problem. It came as a sound. Wet, pulpy, persistent. Sometimes it was the hush of rain on a windshield. Sometimes it was the grit of sand ground between molars. Always, it was rhythm, a metronome for his focus, a little engine he wound with his own nerves, and then rode until the needle dropped back into the groove of ordinary living. TV time. Chew. Long drive in the dark, while the road unspooled in silver. Chew. Grocery lines. Oil changes. Birthdays, where the candles leaned and the wax pooled and he stared through the frosting at something only he could see. Chew. Chew. Release. I don't think he knew he did it. I didn't either. Not really. Not until a friend flinched at the sound and whispered, "Dude, your dad's chewing his tongue." The sentence landed like a pebble in my chest and rippled outward. I defended him. Of course I did. Children do. We build a fort around our parents out of whatever we've got. Bravado, loyalty, anger. We yell from the parapets because we're small, and the world is large, and we need our giants to stay upright. Listen closer. But once you name a sound, you can't unhear it. It goes from air to architecture. After that day, I heard the chewing everywhere. I watched the way it tuned his face, clenched, then released. Frown ironed out, cheeks softened, brow smoothed. The chew was a gate that opened and closed and kept the flood from breaking him. I never learned what pressed against that gate. I only learned how it failed. He put down the chew and picked up the bottle, and the sound moved from his mouth to the house. The clatter of ice, the glass ring on wood, the long, elastic nothing between sentences. He died earlier than anyone planned, and the quiet that followed wasn't real quiet. It was the kind that has a shape, the shape of a missing thing. Adults explained that kids bounce, rubber bands, flexible, resilient. I didn't bounce. I crackled. I felt like the rubber band in the old drawer, inert, powdered, intact until touched, and then spiderwebbing into ruin from a single stretch. I did not explode. There were no headlines, no melodrama written on the skin. I simply changed gradients, an inside weather no one else could feel. Mom called it a break and sent me away for a month so the break wouldn't happen. That's the trick of certain places. They exist to contain what might occur. The ward wasn't padded or loud. It was a corridor dream. Long white halls, with a medical blue stripe marching forever and never arriving. Lights that hummed until the hum dissolved into the air and became part of breathing. Doors that closed softly, as if the hinges were anesthetized. People were cautious with their bodies, like their limbs were rentals. They folded themselves into chairs and conversations that never finished. Danger wasn't aimed outward. It was vertical. It fell through you, like a shaft of light dusted with particles you only saw if you didn't blink. I watched. It's what I do when I can't do anything else. I turned my eyes into a journal. I took inventory of rituals. A girl twirled one braid until the hair broke into little hay straws. A boy smoothed his forearm with his nails, like he was ironing the skin. Legs bounced to private songs. Fingers drum spoke in Morse. No one decoded. The place was quiet enough to hear the clock measure regret 1 second at a time. My roommate didn't eat. Or rather, she performed a version of eating, so convincing it fooled the chart. Her tray left dented, not emptied. The apple bruised, not bitten. The sandwich dissected and reassembled until it looked eaten from far away. She wasn't frail. She was tensile, a cable drawn tight between a cliff and a helicopter, humming with strain, and you could hear the music of it if you stood close. At night, precisely 30 minutes after lights out, a hand disappeared into the slit of shadow between her bed and the wall, and returned with a small bag of chips. Sour cream, cheese, never plain, never salt. Flavor mattered. She opened the bag with the delicate cruelty of a surgeon splitting a seam. The crinkle rose and fell, like breathing. And then the ceremony. Chip, tongue, lick, replace, chip, tongue, lick, replace. She never crunched. She unwrote the chip with patience, tongue combing every last crystal of seasoning until the triangle went soft. A translucent scab surrendered before it could scar. Then she slid it back into the bag to melt among its unloved siblings. By dawn, the bag's lip peered out like a tongue. The swamp smell of artificial onion and human damp made its own weather in the room. We did not speak about it. We curated silence. I lay awake and counted licks. I learned the difference between the sound of searching and the sound of finding. I should have been disgusted. Instead, I felt a steadiness enter me, a tempo. Something was happening. In a place designed for nothing to happen, this mattered. Don't flinch. If you're still not moving, if your hand is hovering like a trapped moth above your knee, you might notice it. That urge to touch the wrongness just to know you can. You'll imagine the bag under her bed and what the pulp would feel like if you pressed your fingers in up to the knuckles. You'll imagine whether your hand would come back clean. Nothing happened for a long time. Then, crack. It was small, embarrassingly small. But in a world of cotton and hush, it was a flare in a dark pasture. I froze. The ceiling hung above me like a lid. The sound came from within the perimeter of my body. My hand hovered near my mouth, as if someone else had placed it there. The corner of my thumbnail waited between my teeth, like a coin poised in a slot. I tested the edge, not flesh, not new, and the relief that entered me when the first sliver surrendered, I could weep describing it, was not about pain. It was about permission, about removing a thing that had been waiting patiently to be removed, and, in its removal, proving that I could still affect the world. The shard lay on my tongue like a tiny boat. I did not spit it out. I sailed it from tooth to tooth, let it floss where floss didn't reach. felt the kiss of keratin against enamel, like the soft rasp of a cat's tongue. I slept with that shard tucked into my cheek, as if it were a message I would decode by morning. Habits are diplomats. They arrive with gifts and promises and only later draw a line through your name and write theirs. A flake here, a corner there. Always maintenance, never hunger. I told myself stories. It keeps me from worse things. It keeps me present. It keeps the pressure from tearing the bag. Days turned into a texture. The itch, that swarm of ants that caravanned my veins, quieted. I gnawed without decision, the way breathing happens when you read. Nails down to nubs. Skin inflamed, then numbed. The gauzy crescents beneath, tender as the undersides of mushrooms, tasted, tested, toughened. When the fingers ran out of geography, I folded myself like a map and discovered the archipelago of my toes. Do you know what pride is? It's finding a new angle for an old want and calling it ingenuity. The itch always returns. It's clever. It learns your calendars. Between wounds, the days went long and empty. I worked more. I came home to the plural quiet you only notice when the refrigerator turns off and the building sighs. I picked up night cleaning at the hospital. I liked the old building best. The morgue didn't have fluorescent lights. It had fixtures that remembered color and tiles that held cool in summer and winter both. One night, I was somewhere between nowhere and later when I met him. An old man, not remarkable except for how perfectly complete he was in being finished. Not a tragedy, not a headline, just a clock that had experienced a final tick. A sheet covered him neatly below the waist. His hands rested atop like obedient animals. A thin gold ring slept around one finger, the way a pawn sleeps around a rock. His nails were honest, yellowed with the slow tincture of time. Too long, not unclean. Neglected like plants on a windowsill of someone who still means to move. I wiped counters while my eyes only wiped his hands. The itch woke and stretched and smiled. My jaw rehearsed, chewing with no object, like a ghost miming life. I told myself not to look. The looking grew stronger. His nails had the exact geometry of surrender. Slight overhang. Hairline fracture. The promise of that first give before the final snap. Do you know the phase? Sound. Like the minute hand discovering it is allowed to become the hour hand. Would you have helped him? No plan. Not really. Plans carry guilt in their pockets. This was, I told myself, a mercy. The smallest kindness sometimes is nothing more than completion. I adjusted his hand because that's what you do. You make the world neat, skin papery, cold with a memory of heat. His thumbnail clicked mine, and the sound was exactly like permission. I lifted his hand the way people do in old movies when they're going to kiss the back of it. A ridiculous chivalry in white tile and bleach. I set the nail between my teeth. It bent. It broke. It bloomed relief into my skull so bright I forgot my name for a second and only remembered silence dissolving. I only took the tips. I only ever took the tips. I set his hand back exactly as I found it. If you had photographed the room before and after, the pixels would have struggled to point to the difference. I promised myself it was singular. The itch smiled and took my promise into its mouth and chewed. The dead don't complain. They have no more errands. The living, however, keep lists. Lists require fingers. I learned gloves matter. I learned which rooms have cameras that don't work, and which guards nap, and which corners smell like the old building dreams of itself. I learned the difference between keratins. Young nails, sing. Old nails, remember. Some split like mica. Some resist until the musician within you earns the note. Sometimes I would let a shard soften under my tongue until it took my heat and became mine. I learned the itch was not a swarm, but a choir conductor. And then the ward came back to me, in the way certain places return, by sound. It was a Tuesday. The elevators were tired. The hall clock stuttered. Tick, 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 tick. A new arrival waited, sheeted. 2 rooms over, someone whistled 3 notes and forgot the 4th. I was working when I heard the bag. Not a bag. The bag. The exact memory of plastic parting in a measured rip, a sound that exists in only one place. 30 minutes after lights out, between a bed and a wall, in a room that learns your night breath. I stood. My gloved hand hovered over a jar of cotton. I knew where I was. I also knew where I was not. The sound came again. A companion sound followed, tongue on seasoning, the sound of finding. I walked down the hall. The sound walked with me, always a room ahead, always behind the next door. I stood in the doorway of cold storage and listened to the old man not eat. I told myself it was memory discharging like static after a sweater comes off. I told myself anything that made it smaller. You don't notice you're being shepherded until you look up and see the fence. The fence was the autopsy room. The light there was wrong. It made colors anemic. There was a wet line on the floor like a tongue had been drawn through dust. The table held a man I did not know, middle-aged, weathered. On his left hand, the nails were perfect. On his right hand, the nails were gone. Not cut, not bitten, peeled, as if each had been convinced to surrender itself whole. The crescents gleamed like peeled labels. My jaw ached the way a muscle aches when it realizes how much it has done in secret. I stared at the right hand and saw teeth marks that were not mine. The itch, at that moment, found a new voice. It wasn't in my body anymore. It was in the room, humming behind the tiles, massaging the air. Do you hear it too? I turned. The steel cabinet doors were shutting one by one without hands, not slamming, kissing closed. The room adjusted itself around me like a coat comes to a body. The bag crinkled behind me. The not bag. The sound that meant night and discipline, and the distribution of seasoning crystals by a tongue that believed in ritual more than any god. When I faced the table again, the middle-aged man had a paint fleck of glitter on his thumb. It had not been there. The glitter had the exact color of the cereal my dad poured on mornings, where he promised to change. My glove made a fist on its own. The itch reached up through my arm and tightened the fist like it was tuning a guitar. I left the room. I did not run. Running makes pursuit real. The next night, I brought myself to the morgue by not deciding to go anywhere else. I cleaned. I organized. I arranged scissors in growing order of honesty. I thought about my roommate and wondered if she still counted licks in the dark. I wondered if she had graduated to something with more resistance. Then, the elevator let out a person who made the hallway feel shorter. She was not on my payroll, and not on any clipboard. She wore the non-expression of someone who has been taught to be a mirror. Her hair was braided into a single rope. The ends were unfinished. Strands sprung out like hay. She didn't look at me. She watched the blue stripe on the wall, as if it were a river she had to cross without stepping on it. She passed. Her smell was onion powder after rain. I followed as far as I did not follow. Later, a doctor I only half knew signed paperwork I never learned to read out loud, and said a name I had heard once in a cafeteria, while pretending not to listen. The name dissolved in the fluorescent hum, and sank through the tiles until it reached me. I went home and tried new angles on my toes until I unlocked a piece of myself that felt like a stuck drawer finally sliding open. I slept with a shard under my tongue and woke with blood in my mouth and a word on my pillow that looked like it had been written with my offhand. I stopped promising. Promises are for people who think the future is a blank page. I had already written on mine with a nail. From then on, the itch brought me gifts. Sometimes I found a brittle half moon under a sink where no one had cut their nails. Sometimes a newspaper photograph of hands showed a crescent missing, and that night, the crescent rolled onto my counter like it had commuted. Once, I woke to a rattling under the oven. I pulled the drawer and found a paper bag that had never belonged to me. Inside, damp chips softened to paste and arranged by size, as if someone had been organizing rain. I did not touch the bag. I kept it to see if it would evaporate. It did not. It became part of the kitchen the way a crack becomes part of a mug, and the mug still holds tea. The hospital called for a double shift. There had been a crash. Sirens braided the air all afternoon. By midnight, I was stacking cold rooms like a librarian looking for the right silence. The first body was a boy with a tattoo of a small anchor on his ankle. The second was a woman with ring lines on her finger where the gold had been removed. The third was a man whose hands were wrapped in gauze, thick as winter socks. The man's chart said, "Accident." The nurses said, "Don't unwrap." The itch said, "Unwrap." I obeyed nobody. I stood by the sink and thought of my father chewing to keep the gate closed, and how the gate broke anyway. The gauze began to loosen itself. That's how I'll say it. I did not touch it. The rolls unwound like careful snakes and fell in rings to the floor. Underneath, the hands were bandages. Yes, but beneath the bandages, the nails were absent, not ripped, harvested. A single sliver remained at the corner of his left ring finger. It lifted as if to test the air. It made the sound. Crack. I understood something then. I was not the only instrument. The itch did not live in me. It lived in rooms. It traveled through rituals like wires. It nested in sounds. It bought tickets in our habits and waited for the conductor to look away. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth and stepped backward until my shoulders touched tile. The tile pulsed once, like a fish under ice. I left the room and found the hallway full of people who were not there. My mother passed, carrying a birthday cake with no candles, icing sweating under plastic. My father walked behind her, chewing a metronome. My roommate slid chips into her mouth and removed them naked as bone. All of them came toward me with their hands extended, palms up. On each palm lay a nail, and under each nail, something moved. If you felt something move in your palm, would you close your hand? I closed mine. What was I supposed to do? I closed it and felt the little crescent's edge draw a line into my meat. I did not bleed. The line wanted a mouth. When I opened my hand, the nail was gone, and a tooth sat in its place. Not mine. A stranger's tooth, root clean, enamel yellowed with someone else's coffee. When I lifted it, it fit between my teeth with a click, so perfect I cried, if only to break the precision of the sound. All night, the hospital made new noises. UV lamps sang like choir boys forced to hum through pressed lips. The vents whispered my name in other languages. The clock swallowed seconds whole and belched minutes. I stayed because leaving would have meant choosing a direction. The next week, I stopped sleeping at the times people agree to sleep. I slept when the itch allowed me to, I began to hear other habits call to one another. Knuckle pops signaling to gum snaps. Leg bounces counting measures for throat clears. The building itself twitched. Elevators shuddered. Doors licked their frames. That's when the first patient woke. Not woke, exactly. Sat up. The chart said deceased. The eyes said otherwise. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He sat like a puppet remembering the choreography. He put his hand out. I offered mine because I am polite, even inside insanity. He placed his palm against my cheek and pressed gently until my mouth opened the way a cabinet opens when you push the right corner. He leaned forward and exhaled. What passed from him into me was not air. It was the sound of chewing, not loud, not grotesque, just the rhythm, the beat. Chew, release, chew, release. It settled in my jaw like a new hinge. When he lay back down, his mouth moved once. He had no tongue. The room did not require him to have one. I wanted to tell someone. Who? What words? Hi. The dead are sharing their habits with me like recipes, and I'm collecting them in my joints. You see the problem. Instead, I listened. I became what the itch wanted, an ear with teeth. You're still holding still, aren't you? Why? Then came the night the power dipped. The hospital went to the color of old paper, and the generator coughed awake like a dog. In the brief between light and light, the dark had shape. Something stood in it, tall, jointed wrong, like a coat rack taught to walk by someone who never owned a coat. It had fingers for days, and the fingers ended in small, hungry half-moons. The thing moved without endpoints. It existed in tilt and suggestion. When it brushed the wall, the blue stripe rippled like a ribbon underwater. It was not new. It was simply visible. It stopped at the window and watched itself in the glass, because glass pretends to be other things. And then it turned and watched me with the careful curiosity of a child with a bug in a jar. I tested the air with my tongue, the way you do when you burn your mouth and want to see how far the injury traveled. It made the sound. Crack. I answered without deciding to. Crack. We held a conversation in a language made of small betrayals. When the power returned, the hallways were full of people again, the living kind, and the thing had arranged itself into the usual geometry of rooms, and returned to being chopped into corners and reflections. After that, I brought offerings, a bag of chips I did not open, a pair of nail clippers I did not use, a plastic mouthguard from a sports store. I left these on the third step in the stairwell no one takes, because it wails when you step on the second. Some nights, the offerings disappeared. Some mornings, they returned rearranged into a shape I recognized only later. A jaw. I began to feel watched from inside, not possessed, observed. Like there was a balcony in me, and someone leaned over the rail during the quiet parts and whispered, "Now." And when I obeyed and took a tip here or there, the whisper said, "Good, good," in a voice that never got tired. The more obedient I was, the more the world unfolded. In a grocery store, I stood by the freezers and listened to ice cream hum, and realized each flavor has its own note. Vanilla sighs, mint hisses, rocky road chirps when no one is looking. A woman opened a door, and the sound went flat. She picked a pint, and her thumb brushed the paper rim, and a sliver of nail flicked onto the linoleum. I felt the world lean toward me, until the sliver shone like a sliver of moon. I did not pick it up. It picked me. I went home with it under my tongue, though I do not remember lifting it. From the balcony, the whisper clapped softly. When the hospital called again, I went, because places call the people they have trained. I walked the blue stripe river and counted doors the way a child counts sheep. Behind door 4, a body breathed. Behind door 5, a body did not. Behind door 6, a body practiced. Door 6 opened itself. The room smelled like pennies and air conditioning. On the table lay a woman with hair like drowning seaweed and fingers like question marks. Each nail had been painted recently. Tiny planets on each half moon. Little rings of glitter orbiting lacquer. Someone loved her enough to make her hands a sky. I said, out loud to no one, "We won't take from her." The whisper laughed in my throat so that it sounded like I did it. "We won't," I said again, and put both hands in my pockets to hold them still, and imagined filling my mouth with cotton. The lights flickered. The paint on her nails shifted hue like a bruise learning a new color. The glitter orbited faster. The planets aligned. I am not being poetic. They aligned. The little rings formed a miniature clock face, and the hands of that clock slid until they pointed to a time I could not read. The woman sat up. She lifted her left hand and offered it palm up, as if to show me that the universe is a prank, with good timing. On her palm lay 7 tiny chips of dried polish, shaped exactly like letters. They spelled, "Listen." I did. Under the vents and the hums and the never-quite-dead fluorescent, sang the sound of my father chewing. The woman's mouth opened. There was a bag in there, a crinkling. Not their bag, a shadow made of plastic memory. She licked the inside of her cheek as if flavor might cling there. Then she lay back down. One planet flaked. A single glitter ring fell to the sheet and rolled a precise circle and stopped dead between us. I took nothing from her. I took the circle. I put it on my tongue. It was cool as a coin, bitter as a promise. If the dead offered you a word, would you pronounce it? After that, everything accelerated the way a car does when you stop pressing the brake and realize there was weight there the whole time. I felt the thing in the power outage wherever I went. It was scaffolding behind reality. It wore our ticks like gloves. It clapped when we chewed. It fed when we picked. It grew taller when we kept still too long, and the itch had to shout. Some nights, I heard entire neighborhoods conversationally cracking knuckles, tapping steering wheels at red lights, worrying cuticles during sitcom pauses. The city is an orchestra pit, and the conductor has 1,000 arms. I stopped taking from the dead. This is important. I stopped because I realized I had been stealing tips from a tide. The tide does not miss the water you drink from your palms. It only measures how long you keep kneeling. The itch grew mean. It pinched. It wrote short sentences on my gums. Now, now, now. I held. I held until my teeth ached from not doing. I held until my shoulders burned. That's when the living started arriving with their rituals unspooling behind them like contrails. A nurse came in with a habit of tapping her badge against her hip. She tapped in 3s. Tap, tap, tap. The 3rd tap released a sigh from the room like a vent opening. The thing in the scaffolding stepped a fraction closer. I saw its nails scrape the painted cinder block and leave marks that looked like tally lines. A janitor cracked his neck. The crack went up instead of sideways, and the lights dimmed a fraction like eyelids lowering. A doctor rubbed her temples. The motion wound a string I couldn't see. When she stopped, the string kept humming. We wind things we do not know how to unwind. I tried to leave early. I couldn't. Not because anyone said no, because the biais blue stripes are mow on the wall, tilted. It didn't change positions. It changed allegiance. It was a river, and it wanted me to keep following. So I did what you're doing. I held still. I waited for the next sound. I promised myself I would only watch. I would not answer. Then the elevator dinged and outstepped my father. Not the man. The habit. The chewing. The rhythm entered the hallway before the memory that wore it. He walked just the way sound walks when it has ankles, forward with a little sideways, as if the world isn't quite flat for it. He stopped in front of me. His mouth worked. I did not look at his eyes, because I knew if I did, I would find a room there with a chair inside it, and I would sit in that chair forever. He put his hand under my chin the way he used to raise my face when I was small. He gave the tiniest nod, the kind an orchestra leader gives when the violin is exactly in tune. Chew, the world said. I didn't. I pressed my teeth apart and felt my jaw tremble like a held door. He looked proud. He vanished the way a sound vanishes when you turn the radio off and the song survives between stations. Night after night, I practiced not obeying. Day after day, the itch demonstrated new tricks, like a dog you never trained who nevertheless learned how to open your fridge. I would wake with a new sliver of polish on my tongue, spelling small words. Stay, now, bend. I would find a fresh bag under my bed, dry this time, intact, as if it were a prop the world wanted me to use at the right moment. Once, I woke to find a small crescent of nail, pressed gentle as a kiss, into the skin of my forearm. When I brushed it away, nothing moved. It was not sitting there. It was under there. I went to the hospital bathroom and held my arm under the bright lie of the mirror. The crescent traveled slowly beneath the skin, like a fish line snagged on a hook, and I could track the route by the way goose flesh bloomed in its wake. It reached my wrist, paused as if to ask directions, and dove for the palm. When it arrived, I felt my hand close without my consent around what was not there. The itch laughed in a tiny falsetto only my bones could hear. Do you still think the itch is yours? Or do you think you belong to it? The next time I was in the morgue, I brought scissors. Not to cut, to threaten, to show that I had tools, too. I laid them on the counter like silver teeth. The blue stripe on the wall shivered. The room admired the scissors, as if contemplating how gently it might ask them to open. I said, I'm done. The vents answered in my father's rhythm. Chip bags answered. The soft peel of polish answered. The creak of knuckles, the throat clear, the sneeze held back and then released. The chorus arrived with pit and stage and balcony and cheap seats, and every mouth open to show the small obsessions tucked behind molars like communion. I said it again. I'm done. The lights went out. In the dark, the thing finally stopped pretending to be architecture. It stood up from the angles and came forward. I saw only its nails, moon after moon after moon, each one holding a reflected me. Small me's crowded in crescents, some biting, some still, some with mouths full. It pressed one long finger to my lips. Still. I obeyed. It hooked that same finger through the scissors and lifted them. The blades opened. The blades closed. The sound was bright and kind. It ran the scissors over the sheet on the nearest table, and the sheet parted the way water parts when you run your hand through it under a faucet. The body beneath did not notice being revealed. The scissors gleamed. The finger brought the scissors to my mouth, and tapped the enamel of my front tooth. Tap, tap, tap. The badge rhythm from the nurse. Then it held the scissors as if to cut my smile free from my face and hang it on the wall. I did not flinch. This is not bravery. It's exhaustion. The finger withdrew. It traced the blue stripe, and the stripe peeled like tape and fell to the floor and curled into a shape I recognized from dreams I do not tell. A jawbone. The room breathed in. The room breathed out. The room. And I cannot make you believe this if you have never felt a building choose. Swallowed. I was standing. I was also inside the tile. The tile was cool and monasterial, and I could feel the grout, like tight seams in a coat. The itch did not live in me anymore. The itch used me as a nail uses a wall. It was a relief. I slept on my feet in the belly of the room and dreamed a courtyard where everyone held their ritual in the sun and laughed, and the sound was not ominous. A little girl cracked her knuckles and birds came. A boy chewed his lip and a fountain started. My father chewed, and a gate opened, and all the water that had been waiting came running in, and no one drowned, because everyone already knew how to float on the itch and call it a tide. When I woke, the scissors were on the floor. The stripe was back on the wall. The sheet covered the body like manners cover hunger. I touched my teeth together. Crack. Not because the itch asked, because I chose. The difference isn't nothing, but it isn't much. I have told you a long story to show you a short truth. You are not made of self-control. You are made of rituals. The world is made of rooms that feed on them. Every click, every tap, every chew, every lick is a breadcrumb leading the thing in the scaffolding to your door. This is not meant to scare you. It is absolutely meant to scare you. It is meant to teach you how to hear where the itch is coming from. Before. It picks the lock of your jaw and whispers now, with your own voice. So do this with me. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your bite. Let your tongue rest like a sleeping animal on the floor of your mouth. Feel the temptation rise like a bubble. Don't pop it. Watch it pass the way a fish passes under a dock, present for a second, then gone, leaving only a ripple your gaze keeps following because we're built to follow. Now, listen to the first sentence again, like a spell you've already said, without knowing what it summoned. Do you get that dull, itchy, and restless feeling in your leg? It's not in your leg, it's in your room, and if you listen closely, you'll hear the bag, you'll hear the chew, you'll hear the tiny, precise crack of a life making room for itself with its teeth. If you heard it right now, would you answer? Or would you make it answer you? Whatever your thing is. Tapping, twirling, biting, bouncing. Don't stop. Don't start. Decide. The thing hates decisions. It prefers reflex. Choose how you will make your noise and when, and watch how the room balks when it can't predict the rhythm it wanted to eat. I have not been cured. No one is. I have changed where I stand in the room. I keep clippers in a jar I never open. I keep a bag of chips I never eat. I keep a shard of my father's metronome in the back of my throat, where songs begin. Some nights, I let the shard touch my teeth, so I remember the language. Some nights, I swallow the urge and feel it pass all the way through me, like a penny you shouldn't have put in your mouth, traveling along the intestine of a day. And some nights, when the hospital sleeps, and the elevators dream, and the stripe on the wall remembers it is a river, I go downstairs and stand in the dark and wait. The thing stands with me. We count together. 1 breath, 2, 3. We listen for the first crack, from someone upstairs. It will come. It always comes. And when it does, we nod to each other like conspirators and let the sound roll down through the building and into the street, where it will find you in your chair, with your leg bouncing and your thumb working, and your mouth open just a little, so the air can touch the place where words are born. And you will decide, won't you? Tell me in the comments, when the itch came while you were listening, did you feed it, starve it, or make it beg?